way better. Oh, my goodness. Okay, can you keep on talking? Let's see.
Yeah, no, it should be fine on this. At least it's
Okay.
reliable.
Yes, perfect. Okay, good. We'll start over again. All right, we will get this. I'm a determined person, and it sounds like
Look,
you are
I'm so
too.
sorry. It's just rubbish, and I've literally been pulling my hair out the last few days, and we were on the phone for hours to the guys to try and get something sorted. But I
Oh,
think we
don't
just
worry about it. You know what? I'm just so glad that you're patiently trying to figure this out with me, and we will figure this out. So we figured it out. We've got a solution, and this will work great. And we'll play it on the radio tomorrow. So I'm glad that this didn't happen on the radio, because when you do it live, your instinct or your recommendation not to do it on the radio was right on, because this would have been disastrous.
it would have been awful.
Yeah. Given that it's like it's not a big deal, and I'm sorry that we had to spend a little bit more time than you thought for the interview. But do you still have time for 50 minutes? Is that still okay for you?
That's fine.
Okay. All right. So let's start over again. And I'm sorry, because I know it's hard to be natural when I've already asked you these questions 3 times.
No, but again, obviously, what's kind of more interesting, less interesting. So just guide me based on what I've said away from the points I was touching on if they were less relevant. Are my answers too long, by the way?
No, they're great. They're fine. Yeah,
because
no,
I can be shorter and punchier if that works better for you. My natural style is to be relatively discursive and just sort of free flow it. But if you want me to be shorter, I can be.
Maybe just because it's nice to have a conversation, have pauses, and then I'll add something, or like, wow, that's a great point, or something. It doesn't have to be like I'm going to say anything that insightful, or I may. Who knows? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we're fine. Thank you. That was nice of you to ask. I think we're good. And I think that I just go with whatever someone's natural style is. But if, like, the ideal for radio is to hear 2 voices, because when you hear one voice the whole time, what happens is your ear, it's just like if you hear a song and there's like a refrain playing for a while, it kind of just sounds monotonous, and it has nothing to do how beautiful the song is that's playing. It has to do with just our ear and how our ears hear. Okay, so, all right, so I'm going to start over. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Fire It Up with CJ show. We're going to be talking about busy and why we are so busy all the time and how to thrive in a world of too much. And we have Tony Crabbe, who is the author of this best-selling book with the title Busy. So welcome, Tony.
Hi, CJ. Nice to be with you.
All right. So we are so busy all the time. What do you think why are we so busy all the time?
Well, I think it comes back to 3 things. And I don't think the reason we're so busy all the time is there's too much to do. Yes, there is too much to do. And, the amount of information and demands are escalating all the time. But I think we're busy for 3 big reasons. 1, it's a brand. 2, it's an addiction. And 3, it's just the easy option.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's break that down. What I love is busy as a brand. Just imagine these T-shirts with us running around with "I'm just so busy." Okay.
Yeah.
Why is it a brand? Coca-Cola.
I think it's the biggest brand on the planet at the moment. I mean, part of the reason that triggered me to write the book is I was on a tube in the Underground in London, and within a few minutes, I heard about 7 people use the word busy. Look. Just think about when you meet someone and say, how are you? We don't just say, I'm busy. We don't pass it over as a matter of fact. We sell it to them. We say, I'm busy, and let me tell you how. And then we spend the next few minutes trying to persuade them quite how busy we are. And then what sometimes happens is they respond, and they try and out-busy you. And it's a competitive act.
Okay, so I'm gonna riff on the idea of a brand. Okay, so a brand is something that means something. It's a moniker, like Coca-Cola. It's like that brand. When I look at it, actually embodies a whole bunch of different meaning inside of it. So, as a business psychologist, what does the brand of busy mean? What does it mean about me when I say that I'm busy?
Well, it means I'm important. Now, but look, if we want to go back into, history, we've evolved from a world of scarcity where there was never enough of anything. So more whether it's of anything, was a self-evidently good thing. Now, clearly, that's not the world we're in at the moment. But also, since the Industrial Revolution, we've obsessed about more. More productivity, more doing, more stuff is where success comes from. And we also learn it early in our career that actually the way to stand out very early in our careers is to do more than other people around us. And so it's it's a path that we've been told is a way towards success, but actually the last thing organizations need these days, certainly beyond the entry level, is more. Just as one data point, since the mid-'80s, the amount of information that we're all consuming has increased by 5 times. And that's astonishing, really. It's unprecedented in history that we're cramming 5 times more information into our brains. But over the same time, the amount of content that the average knowledge worker is producing has increased by 200 times.
Wow.
Now, if you hold those numbers together, just in social media, email, whatever, if you hold those numbers together, that just has got to mean the vast majority of our activity, our more, is just white noise. No one can pay attention to it. So we cling to this brand, but it becomes an increasingly hollow brand because it doesn't differentiate us at work. It doesn't allow us to be impactful at work because we're dissipating our energy in too many things. And it's not very satisfying. It's not much fun.
So it's like a societal definition of success. Success equals more, which more means that you must be busy. And then that busyness, you're now questioning whether that whole busyness and more is even the right thing to be shooting for as a corporation.
No,
and why is it not the right thing to shoot for in your estimation? You're a business psychologist, which means that you work with companies and people within companies to do what? To make them more productive, to make better decision makings. What is it that you're trying to help them do?
Yeah, so I'm a business psychologist, so I look at the way people think, how people feel at work, and changing their behavior, if you like. So they're the kind of areas I look at. But look, what are companies striving for these? What do people obsess about? Well, we're knowledge workers. So you'd think part of what a knowledge worker should do is think. That's just the starting point. Some studies have found that the average knowledge worker is spending between 15 and 30 minutes thinking a day. So that's 58% of knowledge workers spend between 30 and 58% of 30 to 58. 58% of knowledge workers spend between 15 and 30 minutes a day thinking. So knowledge workers aren't thinking. That just doesn't sound...
Only 15 to 30 minutes a day actually thinking? So what are they...
Yeah, sorry, I completely blew that stat. But yeah, so
that's scary.
30% of knowledge workers say they do no thinking at all, and 58% said just under 30 minutes. Which doesn't sound right.
No.
Companies are obsessing about innovation and collaboration, and we're too busy to do it. So we know that the kind of time pressure a lot of us put ourselves under means we are less creative, we're less imaginative, and certainly less likely to collaborate. And then you look forward, and the World Economic Forum asked themselves recently, what are the core capabilities, what are the core skills that are going to be important in 2020? Now, 2020 is not very far away. And they were, and I slightly paraphrase here, but they were complex problem solving or thinking, creativity, and empathy or genuine connection. And all 3 of those are massively undermined by our busyness. And I think what's happened is, I don't think it's ever happened, it's not a conscious plan, but I just think what's happened is because we followed this unquestioned assumption that more is a good thing, we've optimized for more. Our technology allows us to do more, but we haven't really stopped and thought, is that still the right thing to do in an attention economy? Right. Where actually, in my view, the greatest shortage is human attention now. It's not stuff.
Wow, that's profound. So the greatest the greatest deficit is in attention. So if you were to,
and even, and sorry, just to jump in, just even that's been found in, I think it was Carnegie Mellon did some studies, because for years, the thing that was holding back the technology industry was processing power, was memory, was whatever. They've now realized that the thing that's holding back the IT industry is human attention.
Our ability to focus on a task. What does the human attention mean?
Exactly. The ability of the operator of the technology to actually focus and devote proper attention to that. And that's my view. When it comes to, let's be clear about what I mean by busyness. I think my view on busyness is this kind of crazy, racing, rushing, juggling, multitasking, that lots of us spend our time doing. And actually, I don't think the opposite of busyness is relaxation on a beach. I think the opposite of busyness is the ability, with all this noise and chaos going on around us, with all this information tsunami that's hitting us, to still be able to sustain sustain focus on the people or the problems that matter most to us. And so when it comes to the technology, it's the ability for people to really focus on the hard problems.
It's interesting because my husband studies a lot of artificial intelligence, and you look at machines, and computing power is able to do things that we're far better than us, right? They can computers can multitask. They can take lots of information in at the same time. These are the things that you're saying are so hard for us to do, right? They can do all those things. And frankly, I mean, I don't think I'll ever beat a computer. I mean, I could study, I could read thousands of books. I could, it's just better at processing information and multitasking than I am. And so...
But that's such a great point, because if you think about it, what's our technology? So I love technology and I love the tools and all the rest of it. So let me just say that. But what's technology done in terms of the way we think and we operate? In a funny way, technology's made us more machine-like. We've got better at doing the things that machines do really well.
Right.
So we're better at doing more stuff. Machines do that well. But when it comes to ruminating on the big questions and kind of joining multiple data idea or connecting multiple ideas together, which takes time, we actually do that a lot less because of all the noise and the communication that we're doing. So we're kind of our relationships have become more transactional. They've actually become much less human. One study found that students entering college in America these days have 40% lower empathy than they did, I think, 15 years ago, because relationships have become more transacted, because we're getting less good at genuinely connecting with all its messiness and humanness. And so, and that's not a flaw of technology, that's just a flaw of the questions that we've asked technology to solve.
Right.
Technology can enable us.
I think it's actually a human flaw. The human flaw is to say, I mean, frankly, if you're going to be completely rational and logical and competitive, you would say, I cannot compete against a computer. So why not focus on the things that my distinct competitive advantage, which is complex problem solving, which, computers can do a lot of, but they're still the kind of complex problem solving and creativity and focus on people that it can't do really well. Like, I should focus on those things.
No, but look at it. I mean, you go into any office around the country today, and you see an awful lot of drone-like behavior of just relatively repetitive, relatively mundane, relatively uninspired, relatively unemotional activity, all of which is eminently replaceable in a fairly short space of time, if we want to go down that route. And there are times when you just think, well, at a time when actually undeniably the questions that we're facing societally, organizationally, are getting more complex, we're actually choosing to think less, to focus less. So it's a weird kind of...
It really is weird. Well, because some of the most complex problems, like you said, that we have to solve are before us, right? Which
Yeah.
is, are we just going to become more? Are we just going to become more machine-like, and not?
Well, look,
Yeah.
I mean, look, I mean, this is okay. This is just a bit crazy, but I'll say it anyway. There was a question called a guy called Enrico Fermi, who was a physicist in the early 20th century, who asked the question, why haven't we discovered aliens? Because from a purely physical, physics perspective, we should have discovered aliens by now. Now, it became known as Fermi's paradox. A social psychologist came up with, an evolutionary psychologist came up with an answer recently, which is, well, maybe they all got hooked on computer games. Now, that might sound a ridiculous answer, but actually, you could argue that at a certain point in social evolution, maybe the virtual world becomes more compelling than the real world.
Yeah.
And, if you spoke to someone in the time of the Apollo missions, by the way, we've never traveled faster than the Apollo missions, no one would have believed that we wouldn't have gone to Mars yet, regularly. And we haven't even been back to the moon since the early 70s. So there's a funny way that we've not made that much progress. Even just look at the 21st of October 2015 was Back to the Future Day. I don't know if you remember Back to the Future.
Yes.
But today's world isn't as cool. We haven't got flying cars and hoverboards than it looked in those days. The virtual world's boringly similar. If you look, all the exciting breakthroughs in recent years seem to be virtual. Now, where does this relate to busy? It could just be that, we're all getting so distracted that we haven't got time to do the real intellectual grunt work, or we don't choose to do the intellectual grunt work that we need to do. Now, look, I'm an optimist. I don't think that's the way we're going to go, but it's a curious reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you
put it this way: there has never been a generation in the history of the world that's had less time alone with its brain than we have. The brain needs time alone to digest, to ruminate, to think. It's why, when you speak to people today, they always say, well, I have my best ideas in the shower. And that's probably because it's the only time when they're not either producing, consuming, or stimulating themselves.
Right. Well, you usually take a shower in like 5 to 15 minutes, so already you've potentially doubled the amount of time that you're thinking.
Yeah.
If on average
exactly.
at work we're thinking 50 to 30 minutes, and just by taking a 15-minute shower and a shave, like, all right, I've doubled the amount. All right, and a couple different things I was thinking of. One is Elon Musk, who had raised very similar kind of points, like we should be doing way more at this point. Why haven't we? Like although we're supposed to be focusing on innovation, we haven't been solving some of the world's most critical problems. And maybe it is, like you said, because we just don't even have time to think, because we are kind of lost in this virtual reality, not literally virtual reality, but digital reality, where we're constantly on our phones. All right, so so I'm going to go back all the way back to how the interview started. You said that the busy really is a brand. And it may be because the second thing you said is busy is addiction, and busy is an easy option. So what did you learn about, as a psychologist, what do you know about addiction, and how is busyness an addiction?
So, well, look, how many of us sleep with our phone by the bed? I mean, I wouldn't invest in an alarm clock company these days. Just about everyone sleeps with a phone by the bed and reaches for email before they even get up. There's habits that we look at our phone every 6 minutes. We switch tasks backwards and forwards to check email or whatever every 3 minutes. All of these things, no one's shouting at us, telling us to do. But it's just, we get a buzz from it. We get a dopamine kick. The neurotransmitter dopamine's released when we do that.
Right.
I mean, the story that I love is Timothy Wilson, a very eminent psychologist, got people in a room and gave them nothing to do. And he said, look, you're in a blank room, no phone, nothing to do for 15 minutes, only 15 minutes. Or you can electrocute yourself. And most people chose to electrocute themselves rather than be sat there with nothing to do, because we're so hooked on this hyperstimulation. And so it's there's a piece, and we know that given the choice, people will always choose the simple and the boring, simple and dull, over the harder but more interesting or more worthwhile. And so we reach for this easy option to fill our time. And the problem is, it becomes, so there's part of it which is just, this stuff is tempting. So there was a lovely study in Germany done with beepers that looked at how often we face temptation. And I think we're in the grip of temptation something like 40% of every waking moment, that we're grappling with one or other temptation. And then they asked, which temptations are we better able to resist? And it turns out we're better able to resist the temptations of sex and chocolate than we are at resisting busyness.
Wait, is that the actual study was looking at sex, busyness?
Yeah, it was looking
chocolate?
It used beepers.
Okay, God, beepers is a surrogate for busyness. Okay, God, so we're more...
No, we use beepers to kind of, to ping, to say, at this moment, are you grappling with the temptation? And then they asked people how many times they were able to resist. And they were more successful at resisting things like sex and chocolate, but we were very unable to resist. We were very bad at resisting another internet search or a message that just came through.
Oh, my gosh.
And so it's kind of and it comes back to these small things. These small things are just really, really tempting. They hook us. So, and then, of course, if you want to go a bit deeper, what happens is we get into this cycle of busyness because we think it's a good thing, and we talked about the brand earlier, and we get busier. So that what do we do? What do we do when we get really busy? We sort of disconnect a little bit, or spend a little bit less time, a little bit less attention on the people, the hobbies, or the projects that really matter to us. So what happens then? Well, what happens is we become a little bit more empty. We become have a little bit less meaning in our life. Now, that doesn't feel good. So that creates a kind of a hollowness inside, which, creates a sort of existential angst, a kind of discomfort with ourselves. So what do? Well, the best thing to drown out that kind of uncomfort or discomfort is more busyness. So we get into this addictive cycle.
So the way that you're talking about a cycle is that it is like an addiction. When I've heard of people being addicted, I have worked really hard to break my addiction to sugar. I've not necessarily solved it, or carbs, and I mean it sounds very similar. Where you really want it, it's right in front of you. It's hard to deny. So what are some strategies that people use to remove their addiction to their electronics and this busyness?
And I think, you do make a good point on the addiction. I think one of the things I was quite keen to do is not, I think it's too easy when you write a book to make trite claims that I've solved it, that do these three things and you'll be solved. I think actually busy, because of the amount of information, because it's actually only going to get worse in terms of more information, more demand, more expectation, more cool things that we're seeing on Facebook that we're never going to be able to do because we haven't got enough time. All that stuff is only going to accelerate. And so there isn't necessarily an easy solution. It's more a bit like we just need to work on this on a daily basis. But it's a crucial thing because life is not in the mundane passing of time with micro tasks. Life's in the big stuff. And so what can we do? Well, the way I think of it is the storms of demand and information are all around us. And so I think the best way of doing it is to think like a surfer. So a surfer doesn't try and control or get on top of the waves, if you like. They're not kind of trying to dominate those, trying to get all the waves ridden. They actually, but in the midst of that storm, they're still able to carve a ride. They're still able to enjoy themselves. They're still able to express themselves. And I think they do that by some simple things. The first is, they only catch some waves. Most of the waves they watch going by. I had one of the fortunate things that happened as a result of the book is I met this amazing woman called, terrible pronunciation coming up, but Irene Wust, who's a Dutch Olympic gold medalist. She won 4 speed skating titles. Amazing woman. And she said, "Yeah, Tony, I need to read your book." And my response was, well, kind of, why? I would hold you up as this person that's achieved great things. And she said, "Yeah, but but parts of my life are chaotic." Now, you know those things where you think afterwards, "Oh, God, what I should have said then was this," and you never did. So it was one of those moments. So what I should have said to her is, but that's success. I mean, actually, success isn't everything being perfect. Success is actually lots of your life being chaotic and yet achieving great things. It's pretty clear that if all her life had been on top of, she wouldn't have won 4 gold medals. So I think we have to cut ourselves a bit of slack here and actually recognize that, A, we can't do everything. And actually, more than that, we shouldn't do everything. Also, associate with Choose the Right Waves is the essence of any corporate strategy is doing less but better. Tim Cook from Apple said they're successful because they say no to good things, good ideas every day to put enormous energy behind the few that they choose. So I think part of what we've got to do is just get really good at choosing what really matters for us, choosing to do less rather than everything, and do it with enormous energy.
Okay, so you want to hear something funny? Oh, I don't think you'll find this funny, or maybe you will. So yesterday, I had to do a big training for 15 people yesterday, and I was trying to put together these slides because I wanted to do a very customized, high-quality job for this group. And so I put together these slides, and and on Sunday, I had time to read your book. And I literally had I was completely spent. I could not focus. And I read probably about a third of your book, and I couldn't focus because I was having, one of the key problems I was having was actually getting my computer going because I was having all sorts of computer issues that would have made making the PowerPoints and everything very difficult. So anyways, I'm on the help desk with the Microsoft folks, and I'm reading your book at the same time. And there's a complete irony in the whole thing because you're talking about not multitasking. And here I am reading the book as some guy from Microsoft is fixing my computer. And my kids are like, "Hey, Mom, when's dinner?" I'm like, it's just like... And then I thought, I just sat there for a moment. I stopped, and I thought, okay, there's something very ironic about this moment. I'm reading about the book Busy. I'm multitasking while I'm reading this book. I'm stressing out before my big meeting tomorrow because I want to actually finish reading this book. And if I talk to Tony, he would probably prefer me not to read the book and no, I've read enough. I've read a third of the book. It's enough because it's like I could either do a crappy job tomorrow because I've completely intellectually spent myself by doing too much in too little time, or I will just not read the 2/3 of the book and Tony will give me a pass because...
And look, and that's the thing. We beat ourselves up about stuff. And of course, the stuff we beat ourselves up about often isn't the really important stuff. We actually give ourselves an easy pass for not playing Lego with our son.
Right.
We let ourselves off for that. And yet we beat ourselves up for not having a perfectly produced PowerPoint deck.
Right.
So we kind of give ourselves an easy pass on the wrong stuff, and we beat ourselves up about stuff that, in the really big scheme of things, don't matter. I mean, coming back to this surfer, the second thing that surfers do is they get really good at immersing themselves in what they're doing and in one thing. Endless studies have shown multitasking's not terribly effective. And the cousin of multitasking, the switching backwards and forwards quickly between things, means we get 40% less done, we get more tired, we think less well. So on every level, it's dissatisfying, it's frustrating, we don't do anything very well. And yet somehow we think that's the thing to do because I've got such a lot on, I just got to sort of do it all, rather than stopping and saying, what's the best use of my attention right now? And
Yeah.
that takes courage at times, right?
Yeah.
It does take a bit of courage to think I'm going to turn up to that meeting, not having read the book, but it is the right thing to do for my family, or for my project, or for my work at this moment. But the end result is and I think this is where busy becomes in some respects, our get out of jail card. We run around like crazy, doing everything. We demonstrate our busyness to everyone. We look frazzled, and we actively demonstrate our frazzledness to everyone. Because if push comes to shove, if we drop the ball, if we're fairly average, we can say, "But I've just got too much on. I'm trying my best. Can't you see?" As opposed to really thinking, what's the impact I'm having? What do I want to do that's going to really make a difference? What's the thing that really matters to the customers, to the organization, in my job, to my family, to whatever it is? And look, we all need to do, I'm not suggesting that you sit yourself, in an ivory tower and only do the 2 or 3 big things in your life. That would be nice, but it's not life. But it is about saying, but those small things shouldn't set the agenda. So when you think about things like switching backwards and forwards, absolutely you need to address email, but do it in bursts during the day, rather than, and so you're switching attention less often. Is a much smarter way of using your brain rather than backwards and forwards.
Yeah. When we were talking earlier, you were mentioning that, which was, I thought, a really good point, is that, the people who created email long time ago, and I used to work at Microsoft, so I was at least one of the foundational people that created email. It was to be more productive, so that you could do more, both at work and at home. And the point that you made that I really enjoyed is that you had said, it used to be before email, someone would knock on your door and, want to interrupt you when it was maybe not convenient for you to be interrupted. And now email is one way of conveniently postponing that conversation at your convenience. But the problem is that with our incessant addiction to busyness, we check email all the time. So it's kind of pervasively interrupting us all the time, when in fact the intention of email was to read it when you wanted to. Anyways,
and irrespective of what the intention is, it's a tool that allows us it actually should reduce our distraction.
Right.
Because people can communicate to us and we can respond to it at a time of our choosing. But we don't. I mean, interestingly, it was a very small study, so we can't really draw too much into it. I just love the story where they found that the consequence of being always on, always available via email or via voicemail or whatever, is as bad for your IQ as losing a night's sleep or smoking marijuana. And it's just, being, this always on state is about as bad for the brain as pretty much anything we can imagine.
So how do we stop? So I get. So one tactic is basically be a surfer and be selective. Less is more. Do fewer things and do the few things that you do really well. You had mentioned some things that you try at home with your technology. Tell us about what some things you do at home.
Yeah. So part of it is creating habits. So look, we're human. These things are appealing. They're designed to be appealing. This technology, or this communication. So we know from looking at people that have got really strong willpower, they're no better at resisting chocolate cake when it's put in front of them. But they're really good at making sure chocolate cake never makes it into their fridge. They've got good habits. So ask yourself, what are some of the habits that you could create that help it or make it easier for you to avoid the temptation in the first place, to make the right choices? So things like, we've got a phone amnesty box in our house where phones go into, because we know that just putting a phone on the table in front of you makes the other person like you less. So, because they know you're going to be distracted and it's difficult to resist. Just not having your email turned on for the first hour, or even many clients I've worked with sort of have got into the habit of just going to a coffee shop en route to work where they don't sign up for the Wi-Fi code, just to spend half an hour. There's a famous book called Eat That Frog, which is basically, don't turn your email on for a while and work on the big thing that day.
Mm-hmm.
So, you just have that kind of quiet time before the craziness of the office and the email, where you just put a bit of focused time into something that matters. Because then you can you can almost cope with the office craziness because you've already made progress. Mm-hmm. And Teresa Amabile, a great researcher from Harvard, has found that one of the biggest motivators for people at work is a sense of making progress on important projects. Mm-hmm. And how often do we get to the end of the day and we've been busy, we're exhausted, but we can't really remember what we've done because we've not made progress. Mm-hmm. Another example is I did some work with a publishing house, and they realized that people weren't thinking. So they converted one of the meeting rooms to a library. Of course, as bookie people, that was an instant sort of signal to them when they go in that room that this is a quiet space, this is a space for thinking, this is a space for reading and reflecting. So they intentionally use the environment to trigger the forms of behaviors that they want. So clearly people aren't going to spend the whole day in the library.
Right.
But the point is, at a time when they want to focus, they don't just think, well, I'll do it from the same place where I do all my other work, where I'm completely distracted. They vote with their feet. So I think there's a lot of things we can do about making subtle changes in our environment that just support the choices that we want to make.
Right. So removing things like whether it's putting, I actually have a friend of mine who at a certain time, he just turns off the internet access in his house. He basically just says no internet, and he just turns it off, and everyone doesn't have internet. And then, in the meditation, they always talk about creating certain spaces, like creating your own space in your house, which is kind of your space for quiet and contemplation. And so and they always say, and I think it's true, the space that I have that's for quiet and contemplation is on the side of my husband's bed in the hallway. It's not like a sacred place, but if we have a small house and it's the only place that I have to do it, and that's where I do it. And so I think it doesn't really matter because it's a place, and I know that that's a place that I meditate, and that's the place that I do my morning stretches and, write journals. I mean, that's basically my space. So that's
exactly. And look, it can be really simple stuff. I'll give you a personal example. For years, I found I was away every Easter. So the school holidays happen, around Easter time, and people would call me up and say, are you free on the 14th of April or whatever? And I'd say, oh, yes, I am. So, then lo and behold, the two weeks Easter holidays would come along, the children would be off school, and I'd be away, and I'd be like, oh, no, it's happened again.
Right.
And so just a little thing. I mean, you think, I've written a book about this stuff, for goodness sake, but it only occurred to us, 18 months ago to say at the start of the last school year, why don't we just put the school calendar straight into the calendar?
Right.
Why don't we put that in up front? So then there's an instant decision that gets made. If someone calls up about one of those days, I look at it and think, well, the children are off, and that triggers a conversation. And, you'd think that's not rocket science. That's not, I wouldn't even put that in a book because it's so obvious. But the point is, I hadn't done it. So it's just being mindful of what are some of the things I want to do differently in the way I think or in the way I act. And then are the little things. So we know, for example, you're more likely to do yoga if you leave the yoga mat next to your bed at night.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's
the triggers that
that's a good idea.
Yeah, so what are the triggers that you can put in the environment that trigger the right form of behaviors? Mm-hmm. What are the ways that you can avoid the temptation in the first place? What are the environments that you could create that actually make it easier for you to do, the different kind of stuff, and for most of us, that make it easier to focus? I mean, Carl Jung used to go off to a tower when he wanted to do his deep work. There's a psychologist called Adam Grant who has found it takes him 4 days to write an academic article, and so he just he knows that, and he just puts it out of office. He still goes to the office, but he just puts it out of office, doesn't speak to anyone for 4 days. I actually wrote my book by pure chance. I was staying on a boat at the time, and with 3 children, it was chaos. But so my brother-in-law lived nearby, and he had a garden shed. So I actually wrote the first 7 chapters of the book in a garden shed in my brother-in-law's house, rather. But you know what? accidentally, I created a great environment. Apart from the cobwebs and the dust,
Right.
there was no internet. There was just a plug socket on a cable from the house. It was completely silent, and it became a place that I could really focus.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no point beating ourselves up. There's no point getting anti-technology. Technology is great. It enables us to do great things. Mm-hmm. But it's just saying that recognizing that it is also a bit, it doesn't necessarily always automatically bring out the best in us. So we just have to be intentional about it and create environments and habits and rituals and avoidance tactics that allow us to do the stuff that we want to do while getting the benefit of the technology.
And you're using examples that are mostly home related, but what do you, and when we had talked earlier, you had said, one of the key things that you've noticed as a business psychologist is that it's not about technology, it's about the ability for people to adapt to that technology. So when we're in the office, what are some things, or these are the equivalent kinds of things? Like maybe you don't, like the publishing company, have a library, but you create a space, like you're saying, to go to a coffee shop and have some off time, or find find a place in your office to hide. Go to the supply closet and lock yourself in. I mean, what are some other things you can do at work so that maybe saying no to meetings, or what are the equivalents for work?
So you're absolutely right. I mean, the same stuff applies to a degree at work. So it is crazy, really, to think of that the most effective way of using our brains is to sit at the same desk for a whole day and hammer out on a keyboard. Mm-hmm. It's just odd. We've created a kind of, but it still comes from this mentality of production, a factory mindset, to kind of put people in those situations and expect creativity, to expect deep thinking in that environment. So I think if you're thinking, look, there's certain things that I want to focus on. The starting point is get really clear about what, where you want to focus. What are the things that you really want to do? Mm-hmm. And then, Stephen Covey used to have the story of put first things first, and I think that still applies. So, start your day focusing on the big stuff. Find environments where you can work. But it's also about conversations that we have with our bosses. So I worked with one of these big cheeses, a CVP of a multinational, and he turned up at an event. Mm-hmm. And he stood in front of the group and he said, I've never missed my wife's birthday. I've never missed my child's birthday. I've never missed the first day of term or the last day of term. I've never missed the opening night of a school performance. Just listed off this whole row of family things that he'd not missed. And we were all sat there thinking, really, he's in a global role, multi-billion-dollar business. How does he do that? So we asked him, and he said, well, I'm really good, which wasn't really very helpful, as it turns out. But anyway, but then we probed, and he said, well, look, I realized that it was a big job, and there would be sacrifices I've got to have to make. I couldn't, and I've got children. I think I had 4 children or something. So I sat with my kids and my wife, and we discussed what was really important to us. And we worked out that there were sacred moments for us, and if I was always there for those, I'd demonstrate to them and to myself that I was putting those first. But also, before I even started the role, I explained, this is my rules of engagement, as it were. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's a couple of lessons from that. One is, whether it's work, whether it's life, we've got to make choices. Mm-hmm. But also, we've got to have the conversations with the people, ideally before the moment where you're trying to make a difficult choice, that you say, look, these are the things we're going to focus on. So if we say to our boss, look, can we agree that the 2-3 things that are critical for me to focus a lot of attention on this month, and then, you drop a ball on something really small, but that they chase you and you didn't respond to an email in 3 hours or whatever the case may be, then you go back and say, look, we agreed I was going to focus on these, and these are some of the choices I'm making. So you start to have some of those conversations that matters. And a lot of us are terrified about that, but there was one study that found that when we ask a question like that, the response is positive twice as often as we expect it to be. Mm-hmm. So we're actually more influential than we think, as long as people understand the rationale for us doing that. Mm-hmm. But most of us just have too much fear to do that. So,
yeah. I think that there's benefit to boundaries, to just basically say, I will do this, I won't do this, I need to work with you on this, and I need your permission when this stuff happens to be okay. And when you were recounting that story, I was reflecting back on my Microsoft days. And there used to be times where, where at Microsoft you're constantly practicing, and this is a long time ago at Microsoft when I worked there, you're constantly using alpha software and installing like the versions of Windows, like maybe like 6 months to 9 months before the customers get it. So you're constantly like experimenting with weird kind of software because we're the beta alpha users, and things would happen things would happen. Where stuff would just disappear, stuff would go, and then you're like, what can I say? Like, I was doing this thing, it's gone. And so then I had someone once, he was gone for vacation. And because, at Microsoft, almost everything was done by mail. And he was gone for vacation for a month or for a really long period of time. And he had so many emails that he said that he just deleted them all and told people that he had a technical problem and he lost everything on his hard drive. Then he sent out an email to everyone and said, if there's anything important that was in that email, please send it to me. Otherwise, all my email was lost.
Yeah.
And he deleted his whole hard drive.
Well, funnily enough, I know someone from Dell who did exactly that, but he didn't even make up a story about it. He just said, by the way, his out of office was, I'm away on holiday. When I come back, I always have great ideas of where I want to focus, and I don't want to lose my first week just dealing with emails. So we're quite direct about it. I mean, look, we work our own strategies out, but the point is, we are, as humans, and this isn't just a work thing, this isn't just an organizational thing, this happens in all kinds of life, we're actually very ungenerous about our interpretations of other people's behavior. Mm-hmm. When we see someone acting in a particular way, they're slow to respond to an email, whatever, we're very ungenerous about how we interpret that.
Mm-hmm, that's true.
Having said that, when the person explains their why, explains their rationale behind acting that way, explains what triggered that, actually we're remarkably generous. Mm-hmm. But in the absence of an explanation, we tend to jump towards a negative view.
Right. So
I think part of it is we just need to have some conversations, and then what? I mean, just personally, I once had a client who seemed to be getting frustrated with my lack of email response, and I sort of noticed a few kind of curt emails. So I picked up the phone and said, look, let me just explain what's going on here. I only look at email twice a day so I can think and focus and blah blah blah. And his mood changed from being annoyed to being slightly inspired and asking me to come and speak to his team. But just because he had the why.
Right. Right.
So
I think that's critical. That is critical, right? Because when that guy from Dell said, yeah, I'm actually that email you sent, I just deleted it. Here's why.
And what he said is, he did it, and he walked away. And actually, he said, he told a few people about it, and a few people said, no way, you didn't say that. And he said he was a bit nervous. But when he got back, he had so many people come up to him and say, I love that email. That was so inspiring.
Right. I'm doing the same now.
Well, exactly. And the point is, I think, coming back to the why, when we do things, there are because a lot of busyness is also a social norm. Lots of people are doing it. And not a lot of us actually want to do it and can provide very good reasons for why we're doing it, other than it's just the thing to do. And when you see someone who seems to be doing something different, it is quite inspiring. When you see someone live into the values, who's making choices, it can have rather than people thinking less of us, often it can be a very positive thing.
I absolutely agree. believe it or not, we made it through 55 minutes without any technical snafus. So do you have anything? I'm like shocked. Do you have any last thoughts that you want to tell folks? Anything, and any words in conclusion?
Look, what I'll say is, in essence, busyness is an inevitable consequence of a world of too much, a world of a crazy amount of information or demands. Busy is a choice. It's not a big choice. We don't choose consciously to be busy, but in 1,000 small ways each day, we choose busyness over focus, busyness over great conversations, busyness over building a paper plane with your daughter. And all I'd say is, over the next couple of weeks, just catch yourself in the act of choosing busy. Catch yourself in the act of choosing distraction over focusing on something for a longer period of time. Catch yourself in the act of actually missing out on an opportunity or a great conversation because you're half thinking about something else, or you're picking up your phone to look at what's going on in cyber world. Because I think the starting point is just to notice it. Notice it and notice the ridiculousness of it. And then, you know what? Play with it. Play with alternatives. This beating busyness doesn't have to be hard work. While busy, I think, is the easy option, beating busy doesn't have to be hard work. It can be deeply playful. It can be a bit iconoclastic. It can be a bit irreverent. But it should be about you. It should be about the stuff that matter to you. It should be about being able to bring your time, bring your attention onto the people and problems that matter to you most. And that's the essence of life, isn't it?
It is. Absolutely. I feel like cheering. I feel like clapping. That is a clap.
Sorry, was that a bit preachy? Was that a bit kind of gospel?
No, it was absolutely wonderful. It's what we all have to hear. We were talking to Tony Crabbe, and we were talking about his book, Busy, How to Thrive in a World Too Much.
It means so much to me that you're listening to the show. Would love your support in any way by giving me comments below, or to subscribe to the show, or share the show with friends. Thank you again for your support. Love and blessings.